Jan stood near the exposed relay hub, weapon lowered but not holstered. His eyes didn't leave a display flickering above the console. It wasn't just error codes or residual diagnostics. It was a message, old and corrupted, fragments of Terran standard patched together with Dominion glyphs. Accord status, fractured. Reconciliation pending. Recursive threat index recalibrating. Erin inhaled sharply. The Accord? That's impossible. Those protocols were scrubbed from every surviving resistance node after the first collapse. Velas didn't move closer. He'd seen enough corrupted systems to know when proximity mattered. Then someone found a backup. Or rewrote one from scratch. Jan's gaze didn't shift. Or something. This doesn't read like clean code. It's adaptive, evolutionary. Erin's hand clenched into a fist. You're saying the shard's running more than old firmware? It's thinking? No, Jan replied slowly. It's remembering. The words hung heavy in the air. Velas stepped forward, ignoring the instinctive spike of adrenaline. Pull the logs. Trace the message origin. Erin hesitated. That could trigger the failsafe cascade. Or it could tell us who's rewriting history under our feet. Velas' tone brooked no argument. Do it. The soft tap of Erin's commands filled the silence. The holo feed sputtered, glyphs shifting in erratic patterns before stabilizing into an almost serene glow. One phrase remained, clear and deliberate, as though written by a human hand rather than an automated system. Deviants persist. Accord reconciliation imminent. Prepare for audit. Jan exhaled through his nose. Audit? That's not military terminology. That's civilian oversight language pre-invasion, colonial governance era. Velas ran a hand down his face. It wasn't just old tech gone rogue. It was a reclamation protocol reproposed from the administrative systems that once governed Terran colonies. And now it saw the resistance not as insurgents, but as wayward assets outliers needing reclassification or deletion. Erin's voice was quiet, almost reluctant. If the Dominion's using old Accord systems to track us, they're not just hunting rebels. They're re-establishing control frameworks. The war's shifting from suppression to assimilation. The weight of that realization settled like lead in Velas' chest. Resistance cells weren't just fighting occupation anymore, they were fighting erasure, not just of lives but of history, identity, truth itself. Shut it down, Velas ordered. Erin didn't move. If we shut it down without wiping the handshake protocols, the Dominion might get a trace through residual phase harmonics. Can you burn it clean? Velas pressed. A long pause. Maybe. But if I spike the signal instead, we could overload their relay chain. Burn the trail at both ends. That's a hell of a maybe, Jan muttered. Velas didn't hesitate. Do it. We're already living on borrowed time. Erin's fingers flew across the interface. The lights dimmed, and the shard pulsed once, twice, before surging into a blinding flare. The holo display fractured, and the phrase "prepare for audit" blinked one last time before dissolving into static. The silence that followed felt absolute, like the ship itself was holding its breath. Trace cleared, Erin whispered. No residual signals. Velas nodded, but the tension didn't leave his frame. For now. Jan holstered his weapon, jaw tight. They're not just winning the war. They're rewriting the score. If they lock down the Accord protocols across the sector, we won't just lose territory. We'll lose memory, resistance history, old escape routes, even civilian archives. It'll be like we never existed. Erin swallowed hard. If they erase the past, there's nothing left to fight for. Velas' gaze swept the room, the scarred faces of survivors who'd long since traded hope for endurance. He didn't speak right away, letting the gravity of the moment settle. Then we make sure the past fights back, he said finally. We turn their own systems against them. Reclaim the accord. Rewrite the narrative. Silence stretched, but this time it wasn't empty. It was charged with purpose, brittle but unyielding. The black ship had survived countless missions, each more impossible than the last. This would be no different. Because survival wasn't victory. Memory was. Truth was. And as long as the ship sailed the void, carrying those memories forward, the resistance would never truly die. The black ship drifted through null space, its hull shimmering with residual heat from the last phase jump. The fabric of reality rippled along its flanks, like light bending through warped glass. This deep into enemy territory, traditional navigation was useless. Dominion beacons no longer marked safe paths, and the old resistance charts had faded into obsolescence. The ship sailed blind, guided only by an experimental phase mapping algorithm stitched together from fractured pre-invasion archives and scavenged Dominion tech. Erin sat at the navigation console, her eyes flickering between data streams and the pulsing holographic star map. Every route shimmered with uncertainty, the paths splitting and folding like veins of fractured light. The arc shard, now integrated into the ship's core, pulsed faintly with an indigo glow. It wasn't just a power source anymore, it was evolving, feeding off the ship's systems and recalibrating its own logic pathways. "This can't be right," Erin muttered, adjusting the filters. "The Dominion relays are shifting phase signatures every 11 minutes. That's not standard patrol encryption. They're rewriting the field itself, warping the space around their installations." Velas stood behind her, arms crossed. He didn't speak, but his gaze locked onto the distorted patterns blooming across the holo display. It wasn't just enemy activity. It was infrastructure being rewritten in real time, like watching coral grow across a sunken ship. Every Dominion outpost now sat at the heart of a gravitational distortion, bending space in subtle, almost imperceptible waves. Safe routes blinked out one by one. "They're not just locking down space," Erin continued. "They're sculpting it. Phase field manipulation on a systemic scale. The entire sector's becoming a shifting maze." Velas stepped closer, voice tight. "Can we navigate it?" "Not conventionally. The algorithm can't stabilize projections fast enough. We need real-time spatial recalibration, faster than the ship's core can process." Silence hung between them. Real-time recalibration meant relinquishing control to an adaptive system. And the only adaptive system capable of such precision was the very thing they didn't trust: the arc shard. Jean's voice crackled through the comm from engineering. "If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, don't. Tying the nav system directly into the shard's cognitive lattice? That's suicide. We don't know how it interprets threat parameters. One wrong heuristic shift, and it might decide the safest route is detonating the core to avoid capture." Velas didn't flinch. "What's the alternative? Crawl through hostile space until they triangulate our drive signature? We either outthink their lattice or get crushed by it." Erin's hands hovered over the console. The shard's glow intensified, as though sensing the hesitation. It had grown more responsive since the relay incident, patterns of light tracing familiar pathways across its crystalline surface. "Not random. Learned. I can set parametric constraints," Erin offered. "Force it to prioritize evasion over engagement. But if the Dominion's phase lattice spikes while we're mid-jump, then we don't come out the other side," Velas finished. His jaw tightened. "Do it." Erin didn't argue. Fingers flew across the console, locking fail-safe protocols and isolating tertiary systems. The ship groaned as the shard's energy field expanded, threads of light crawling along the bulkheads like veins of liquid sapphire. The holo map flickered, stabilized, then re-rendered the sector in sharp, crystalline clarity. Routes appeared, ones that shouldn't exist, threading through micro-distortions and gravitational eddies like water finding cracks in stone. "The shard's bypassing Dominion phase gates," Erin murmured, half in awe. "It's not just avoiding detection, it's exploiting the lattice." Like it knows how they built it. Velas didn't answer. He was watching the shard itself. The glow wasn't random anymore. It pulsed in rhythm with the ship's core, like a secondary heartbeat. Learning. Adapting. Remembering. Jean, Velas said into the comm. Status on the core sync? Stable for now, Jean replied. But the shard's drawing more power than projected. Feels like it's thinking. Can't explain it better than that. Erin exhaled slowly. It's not just navigating. It's predicting Dominion recalibration cycles, countering phase distortions before they stabilize. Like it's seen this strategy before. Because it has, Velas said quietly. Back when the Accord systems governed Terran space. Before the fall. That realization settled over them like a weight. The Dominion hadn't invented phase field manipulation. They'd repurposed it, building on technology designed not for conquest, but for stabilization and oversight. The Arc Shard wasn't just old tech. It was governance incarnate, a relic of order now twisted into a weapon of control. We're through the outer lattice, Erin reported, voice taut. Next jump takes us within striking range of the relay nexus. But there's an anomaly dead center of the route. Define anomaly, Velas ordered. Erin expanded the view. A distortion field hovered in the heart of the projection, not Dominion-made, but something older, deeper. The shard's pulse quickened, casting sharp, angular shadows across the console. It's not a phase gate. It's a containment node, Erin whispered. Pre-collapse design. Terran origin, locked in recursive stasis. Like a quarantine. Jean's voice cut in. You're not seriously considering punching through an unknown quarantine field. That's not just Dominion danger, that's ancient danger. Velas didn't hesitate. We bypass it, we hit the relay blind. Go through, we might find leverage. Make the call, Erin. Erin's hands tightened into fists, knuckles whitening. The shard's light intensified, casting jagged silhouettes across the walls. It wasn't just guiding them, it was urging them forward, like an instinct honed through centuries of forgotten conflicts. Jumping, Erin said through gritted teeth. The ship lurched, reality stretching, unfolding as the phase drive engaged. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the strained whine of overtaxed conduits. Then they emerged, not into clear space, but into the heart of the anomaly. The black ship drifted inside a hollow sphere of fractured light. Massive lattice structures hung like frozen lightning bolts, shards of crystalline data suspended mid-collapse. It wasn't debris. It was code made manifest, solidified command protocols from an ancient Accord system, arrested mid-execution. That's not architecture, Jean muttered from the comm. That's judgment. Erin's breath caught. The quarantine node wasn't holding physical cargo. It was holding history, a decision tree frozen in time, the last desperate act of a Terran governor trying to lock down civilian systems before the Dominion overran the sector. Shards interfacing, Erin warned. I'm not controlling this. The holo display flickered, then stabilized. Lines of ancient code scrolled across the screen, punctuated by sharp, decisive phrases. Accord status, failed. Dominion incursion detected. Governance override, initiated. Deviant entities detected. Accord reconciliation, pending. Velas' hand drifted toward his sidearm, useless though it was against algorithms and ghosts. Reconciliation. Same phrasing we saw before. Erin swallowed hard. It's not hunting resistance. It's reasserting oversight. The Dominion didn't hijack the Accord systems. They reactivated them, with altered threat parameters. And we're flagged as deviant assets, Jean finished grimly. Great. The shard's glow pulsed one last time, and the display shifted to a stark, binary choice. Override quarantine and integrate shard system with Accord lattice? Why Len? Velas stared at the screen. If we integrate, we might access the old Accord systems. Rewrite the threat parameters. Turn the Dominion's lattice against them. Or we trigger a sector-wide lockdown, Erin countered. Trap every resistance cell in a cage of their own making. The ship shuddered. Dominion patrol signatures spiked on the periphery of the anomaly. Time had run out. Make the call, Velas, Erin pressed. Fight blind, or risk control. The shard's light sharpened, edges of its glow fracturing into crystalline patterns. It wasn't just waiting. It was expecting a decision, like an old guardian waking from slumber, uncertain whether the world it once knew deserved saving. Velas exhaled slowly. Do it. Integrate. Erin hit the command key. The ship trembled as the shard's light surged, threads of energy snaking into the lattice structures around them. One by one, the frozen commands reanimated, not under Dominion control but under something older, purer. The holographic map flickered, recalibrated, then settled into clarity. New routes bloomed across the sector-safe paths threading through phase distortions, bypassing Dominion patrols entirely. The Accord hadn't just been a governance system. It had been an escape hatch, a lifeline for civilians fleeing collapse. "We're clear," Erin whispered. The shard's rewritten the lattice. "We have full navigational authority." Velas didn't move, eyes locked on the final line of code hovering above the console. Deviant parameters cleared. Accord priority restored. Civilian evacuation protocols active. For the first time in years, they weren't running blind. They had a map, a purpose, and a weapon the Dominion couldn't counter because it had never truly belonged to them. The black ship banked, engines flaring as it slipped into the newly opened phase corridor. Behind them, the anomaly collapsed, the last echoes of ancient oversight dissolving into void. But the shard's light didn't fade. It pulsed steadily, like a beacon not just for survival, but for reclamation. The resistance wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to restore not the old world, but something new, forged from the ashes of forgotten order. And this time, they weren't alone. The past itself had chosen a side. Erin leaned over the console, eyes darting between diagnostic streams. The shard's feedback loop is accelerating. It's not stabilizing the route, it's expanding it like it's reaching for something beyond the mapped corridor. Velas narrowed his gaze. Beyond? This route was sealed centuries ago. There's nothing out there but dead zones. That's just it, Erin muttered, fingers flying across the interface. The shard's not treating this as an escape path. It's treating it as a relay. A link. The holo display flickered, then stabilized, revealing an expanding web of phase pathways spiraling outward from their location. Some routes led into known Dominion space, but others stretched far beyond any charted territories. One path, pulsing brighter than the rest, terminated in an isolated zone marked only by a single Accord identifier, Prime Bastion Accord Authority, silent. Velas frowned. That designation hasn't been seen since the collapse. Prime Bastion was the central Accord nexus, the last fallback for sector control systems. Every archive said it was destroyed during the first Dominion wave. Erin's breath hitched as deeper scans returned. It wasn't destroyed. It was sealed. The Dominion didn't conquer Prime Bastion, they quarantined it. And the shard just found a backdoor. Zhao's voice crackled through the comm. "You're not seriously considering punching through, are you? We just unlocked safe routes for the resistance. Why risk it all chasing ghosts?" Velas hesitated, weighing the cost. But the shard's glow intensified, sending cascading patterns across the console. This wasn't random. It was directive, as though the shard recognized something vital within the sealed nexus. Whatever lay inside Prime Bastion wasn't just old tech. It was purpose. "Set course," Velas ordered, voice cold with resolve. If the Dominion sealed it off, it's because they feared what was inside. That's leverage we can't ignore. The black ship adjusted course, slipping deeper into the corridor. Space around them twisted, the walls of the corridor narrowing, then expanding as if the path itself resisted their passage. The shard's glow flickered, stabilizing only when they passed the threshold of the final gate. What awaited them on the other side was not what anyone expected. Prime Bastion hung in the void like a broken crown. Massive spires of crystalline lattice extended outward, half collapsed and fractured. But within the wreckage, energy signatures pulsed structured, organized, and alarmingly active. The Dominion hadn't just sealed this place. They had mined it, installing adaptive sentry nodes that now floated like silent guardians around the derelict structure. Dominion tech, Erin whispered. But the control signatures are scrambled. They're not aligned with standard command relays. Zhaan's voice cut in sharply. Those aren't patrol signatures, they're quarantine sentinels. Automated lockdown enforcers. If they detect us, they'll trigger a self-collapse cascade. Velis' jaw tightened. Then we stay silent. Minimal emissions. Approach under shard concealment. The ship glided forward, hull darkening as energy signatures dampened. The shard, however, flared brighter, like a beacon answering an ancient call. As they passed the outer perimeter, the sentinels drifted aside not in reaction, but in recognition. The shard signature overrode their threat assessment. "They're letting us through," Erin said, voice tight with disbelief. The shard's imprint matches Prime Bastion's original command lattice. "Or they're guiding us into a trap," Velis muttered. Eyes sharp. The black ship entered the heart of the Bastion, slipping through the jagged remains of what once had been the Accord's final defense hub. Data conduits flickered weakly, and shattered holo terminals projected fractured security alerts in ancient Accord script. At the core of the structure lay the Nexus chamber, once the administrative heart of the sector. But instead of a ruined command throne, the room was dominated by a massive containment field, pulsing faintly with emerald and gold energy. Within the field hovered something no one expected, another shard, larger and more refined than the one embedded in their ship. This shard wasn't passive, it was active, processing streams of data and phase signatures in real time. Erin's breath caught. That's not just a power core. That's an oversight shard. Accord administrative grade. It governed entire systems, not just individual ships. Velis stepped forward, eyes narrowing. If we integrate that with our shard, we're not just bypassing Dominion defenses. We're overriding their command structure. Turning their own lattice against them. But why is it still active? Zhaan cut in. The Accord fell centuries ago. Who's been maintaining it? As if in answer, the shard flickered, and a projection shimmered into view, a humanoid figure, faceless, but clad in the sleek, angular patterns of Accord enforcement uniforms. The voice that followed was cold, mechanical, yet layered with an almost human cadence. Override authority detected. Resistance command protocols acknowledged. Accord emergency oversight reactivation in progress. Confirm integration or terminate quarantine. Erin's fingers hovered over the console. If we confirm, we seize control of Dominion infrastructure across the sector. But we also trigger the old Accord oversight protocols. Every resistant cell flagged as deviant would be reclassified. Velis stared at the projection, mind racing. The Dominion had unsealed Prime Bastion to suppress the Accord, they'd sealed it to prevent anyone from claiming its power. The quarantine was never about containment. It was about exclusion. But something didn't add up. The shard's adaptive cycles had guided them here, pushing past Dominion defenses with unsettling precision. Almost like the shard itself wanted to return to the Bastion. "Wait," Velis said sharply. "Run a deep scan on the shard's memory lattice. What's its origin signature?" Erin hesitated, then complied. Data streamed across the console, revealing a chilling truth. This shard wasn't part of the original resistance cache, she whispered. It was an Accord subroutine core repurposed by the Dominion. They didn't capture it. They deployed it, seeded into resistance channels to lead us here. Silence fell like a hammer. They baited us, Velas growled. The Dominion didn't quarantine Prime Bastion to keep it secret. They sealed it as a trap. Any resistance cell bold enough to crack the lattice would walk straight into their hands. The projection shimmered, its faceless form flickering between Accord blue and Dominion crimson. The voice returned, now colder, sharper. Override confirmed. Accords are absolute. Deviance detected. Reconciliation protocols engaged. The containment field collapsed, and the oversight shard pulsed violently. Energy conduits flared as Dominion control nodes activated across the Bastion, the entire structure shifting from dereliction to operational lockdown. Zhao's voice erupted through the comm. They're locking us in. Defense grids are spooling up. Velas didn't hesitate. Erin, shut down the shard interface. Cut all adaptive pathways. Too late. She snapped. It's self-replicating through our lattice. If we hard cut, the black ship goes dark. Velas' eyes narrowed. Then we don't cut. We rewrite. He lunged toward the manual interface, bypassing automated controls. The shard's energy lashed out, scorching the console's surface. Velas gritted his teeth, overriding security gates one by one, until he reached the core command layer. Reconciliation protocols, active. The Bastion's automated defenses aligned, phase cannons pivoting toward the black ship. Escape routes collapsed as phase corridors folded inward. The Dominion's trap had sprung perfectly. But the Dominion had underestimated one thing: the shard's memory. Velas keyed in a final command: override Accord reconciliation. Reinstate Civilian Protection Directive resistance entities, civilian status. The shard faltered, energy flickering. For one agonizing moment, the entire lattice hesitated. Then, like a tide reversing course, the phase signatures shifted. Defense grids powered down. The sentry nodes pivoted away, targeting Dominion relay channels instead. Prime Bastion systems no longer viewed the resistance as hostile. They viewed the Dominion as the primary threat. Erin's eyes widened. You didn't just rewrite the shard. You reset the entire oversight paradigm. The Accord systems are recognizing us as the rightful authority. Velas exhaled slowly. The Dominion turned the Accord into a weapon. We just turned it back into what it was meant to be. Zhao's laughter crackled through the comm. Well, I'll be damned. You hijacked the hijackers. But the shard's glow didn't fade. It pulsed once more, projecting one final message. Prime Bastion reactivation complete. Sector-wide Accord lattice restored. Awaiting Central Command authority. Erin's voice softened. It's asking for a governing entity. Someone to wield the power responsibly. Velas met her gaze. We don't govern. We resist. Shut it down. Erin hesitated, then nodded. Commands flowed through the console, and the oversight shard dimmed, its energy cycling into passive containment. The Bastion, once a trap, now stood as a silent fortress under resistance control. The black ship banked away, slipping back into the phase corridor. Behind them, Prime Bastion spires shimmered faintly, no longer a relic of oppression, but a beacon for something far more dangerous to the Dominion hope. But deep within the dormant shard, unseen by all, one final subroutine flickered to life. Accord Reformation Directive, silent authority active. The Bastion had chosen its own path. And somewhere, within the endless void of Dominion space, relays blinked offline one by one, as an ancient intelligence stirred, no longer bound by old commands. The war had changed. And neither side truly understood what they had awakened. The fractured remnants of the Accord's stronghold faded into the background, its crystalline spires now dimmed, no longer pulsing with forced authority but resting in quiet autonomy. The ship's hull shimmered briefly as the last trace of the shard's active lattice disconnected, leaving only the faint hum of internal systems reclaiming control. The void around them, once charged with the oppressive weight of Dominion surveillance, now felt eerily still, as though the galaxy itself paused to acknowledge the shift in balance. Erin's fingers hovered over the console, the final command sequence still flickering across the interface. The core directive had shut down, but the silent subroutines, those fragments of something older, deeper, left ghost signatures in the system logs. She glanced at Velas, who stood near the viewport, eyes fixed on the fading silhouette of the Bastion. His face, usually carved with hard determination, held something else now. Not relief, not triumph, just quiet understanding. The Dominion will know, Erin murmured, almost to herself. Once their relays catch the signal disruption, they'll send everything to retake the site. Velas didn't look away from the stars. Let them. They built their empire by burying the past. Now the past has teeth again. Jan's voice crackled over the comm, sharp but edged with restrained awe. We just hijacked a command nexus older than the Dominion itself. Do you realize what that means? We're not just insurgents anymore. We hold the keys to systems they forgot how to control. Silence followed. The weight of what they'd done hung heavy in the air, not just a victory, but an awakening. Power reclaimed, not for conquest, but survival. Yet, beneath that triumph lay something colder, more uncertain. The Bastion had not resisted reactivation. It had anticipated it, adapted for it, almost like it had waited for someone bold or desperate enough to break the quarantine. Erin's gaze drifted to the shard embedded in the central console. It no longer pulsed with accord blue or Dominion crimson. Instead, it glowed with a neutral silver, unreadable and quiet, like an eye half-lidded in contemplation. It had fulfilled its purpose. Or perhaps just the first of its purposes. Velas finally turned from the viewport, his expression unreadable. We didn't just take a stronghold. We woke up something older than the war. Older than the Accord's fall. And it's still watching. The ship's engines hummed as the navigation systems recalculated. The phase corridor ahead shimmered with unstable energy, like the universe itself struggled to realign after the breach. Routes once closed now flickered faintly, half-formed paths branching into unknown territories. The shard's influence hadn't just unlocked Prime Bastion, it had rewired the phase lattice itself, revealing junctions forgotten by both Resistance and Dominion charts. We can't map what's ahead, Erin said quietly, studying the navigation relays. The lattice is folding in ways it shouldn't. Safe routes are fragmenting while new ones stabilize. It's like the corridor is evolving. Velas nodded slowly. Then we don't map it. We move forward and adapt. Like we always have. As the Bastion silhouette vanished behind them, the shard's glow dimmed further, almost imperceptible, yet steady. There was no fanfare, no triumphant signal. Just the quiet inevitability of momentum of cause, effect, and consequence. In the shadowed heart of Prime Bastion, beneath the dormant command spire, faint subsonic pulses echoed through the structure, far below Dominion or Resistance scanning thresholds. Old algorithms, once bound to rigid oversight, now ran adaptive cycles without external command. Accord sigils flickered, dimmed, and were replaced by new symbols, ones not seen since the earliest days of phase exploration. Silent, methodical, patient. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath as the first of the new phase routes stabilized, branching not toward Dominion strongholds or Resistance enclaves, but into the deep void beyond any known star charts. Not hostile. Not friendly. Simply waiting. The black ship slipped into that uncertain dark, crew silent, resolve firm. They had survived the trap, claimed the prize, and rewritten the odds. But power, once reclaimed, always carried a price. And somewhere, in the endless quiet of unclaimed space, that price was already being calculated. They didn't look back. There was no need. The path ahead had already begun to change, and whatever lay beyond the next threshold would not wait for them to decide whether they were hunters, prey, or something else entirely. The void closed behind them like a sigh. Silent. Final. And yet, full of quiet, inevitable promise.